Welcome to the EcoParent Podcast Network. I'm Sam, the founder of EcoParent magazine. My partner Alexis and I had zero experience in the publishing industry, no money, and a new baby. But we quit our jobs, leapt into the unknown, and started EcoParent magazine anyway. It was absolutely freaking terrifying. But at the same time, it felt right. Just a few years into the journey, Alexis was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer that later found its way to her brain. It was utter chaos, navigating treatment schedules, caring for a 3-year-old, and trying to run a fledgling business, not to mention the general emotional havoc. Alexis didn't make it, but the rest of us did, and I've spent the years since raising a wonderful son and building EcoParent into North America's top print magazine for conscientious families. Even 10 years in, we're still a very small crew. If you send an email, it's probably me that will answer you. And this podcast network is a monumental step for us, another leap into the unknown. But like before, it just feels right. And I know that Alexis would agree that the podcasting team I've assembled here is an incredible group of people whose only goal is to inspire the best in you. Okay, I'm going to shut up now and let you listen to the podcast. Thank you so much for stopping by. You're the reason we do what we do.
If the kid really wants to help and they have some skills, well, now you can say, great, here's the basil, here's a little bowl, we're going to put you at the table. Now they can take 5 minutes to measure the time, the oregano and the basil, because you're still chopping all your food, you're still talking with them, and they're excited. They're a little excited to do it because you can quantify these skills.
The Feeding Families podcast is all about nutrition for kids. We bring you new ideas and inspiration for your kitchen and answers to your food questions so you can overcome the very real, very frustrating food-related challenges so many parents are trying to figure out. I'm your host, Jess Sherman, family wellness educator, author, practitioner of functional and holistic nutrition, and mother. I want you to develop unwavering confidence in the choices you make every day, so let's get into Feeding Families. Hello again, families, and welcome to another episode of the Feeding Families podcast. I am Jess Sherman, your host, and I have another fantastic person to introduce you to. I have Katie Kimball with me today. Hello, Katie.
Hi, Jess. It's so great to connect with your families.
It is always a pleasure to talk with you and hear what is going on in your world. By way of introduction, Katie is a blogger. You've been blogging for a long time, right, Katie?
Yeah, I'm a grandma blogger since 2009.
So she blogs over at Kitchen Stewardship, which I'm sure a lot of my listeners here have heard of. And if you haven't, you definitely need to go over because, wow, what an archive. So she blogs over there. She's a former teacher like myself. So we've got a lot in common. And she's a mom of 4 kids. And she is the founder of Kids Cook Real Food, which is an online cooking class for kids. Katie is very passionate about getting kids in the kitchen. And one of the reasons why I asked you here, Katie, was because what I love about what you're doing is that you love to teach kids to cook, obviously, because that's like a big part of what you do. But it's more than about just the skill of cooking, right? They learn so much. You know, one of the things I talk about with my families a lot is food is not just food. Right. There's so much around food. And so that's what I wanted to bring you here to talk about some of the things, because you've worked with thousands and thousands and thousands of kids and families, right?
Yes. Yep. We've got almost 20,000 on every continent right now in our membership.
Every continent. That's a good little dose of perspective.
I love being so international too, because it just underscores that it's not about necessarily what kind of food is on the table. We all need the same knife skills and sauteing and how to put things into the oven safely. You know, it's just all about breaking it down into these little skills.
Yeah. You know, we share this common history of having been school teachers and then leaving school teaching because we got fascinated by food and feeding children, particularly. Take me back to that moment when we were just like, I want to teach kids to cook. Like, what drew you to that?
You know, it started out actually with a little bit of my own desperation as a mom of recently become a mom of 4 kids. And at that point, I had been on the real food journey for almost 10 years. And I was realizing I was spending so much time preparing food, but I was not seeing the children I was nourishing. And so I needed help. We needed some things to be able to, to do together. And I sort of had a moment like, when your kid hits 9, people start pointing out that you're halfway through your time. That they're going to be 18. And so my oldest was like 9 and 10 at this stage. And I was like, I have set a good foundation of them like eating vegetables and eating a wide variety, right? But if he doesn't know, Paul, my oldest, if he doesn't know how to do this for himself, he will go off to college and like either spend way too much money buying, fancy organic prepared food, or just go back to like ramen noodles and frozen pizza. Like neither of those to me are good alternatives because I'm a frugal girl. So for me, it started out in desperation. And as I taught my kids to cook and as I realized that it's so much more than the skills. Like you said, there's a huge influx of confidence and self-esteem and growth that comes with being able to do this authentic task. Feeding, like what is the most basic human need is to be nourished. And so when a child can fulfill that need for someone else, they feel so good about themselves. They feel it's a true sense of pride, way beyond, good job and participation medals and all of those trite ways we try to raise self-esteem. Teaching a kid an authentic skill like nourishing others, there's no comparison.
There's so much to unpack in that. Was that a surprise to you? Because he's like you say, sometimes we so often like we grab onto a strategy or a tactic or a project out of desperation of just like, I just need to do something. Was all that collateral stuff surprising to you, or did you expect it?
No, it really was a surprise. I am uber practical. And so for me, it was like life skills, responsibility. I want to raise kids who are hard workers, right? And those are all like really good ends, really good goals. But I was totally surprised by the amount of confidence and the connection that we have too in the kitchen, where that's where I hear their stories. That's where we can spend that quality time, and the fact that they're more connected to their food. Time and time again, members in our course tell me, my kid never ate celery until they cut it themselves and spread some peanut butter on it. Geez, if I'd known that was all we had to do, right, I would have done this years ago. So like that there's a connection with the food, connection with family, and a creativity too. My oldest, Paul, will say he likes cutting vegetables because it feels therapeutic.
Oh gosh, how old is he?
He's 16. Oh
my gosh, if you could find therapy in cooking, that's amazing. Right? Cooking nourishing stuff, not just turning to junk food. Right?
He'll always sign up when we have like a list of tasks that need to be done. He'll always sign up for like chopping the peppers to freeze or whatever, because he appreciates that and enjoys it. I thought, wow, it's pretty insightful for a 16-year-old boy, especially to say, wow, I find that like really therapeutic, and it's beautiful to watch.
It's beautiful. We have to come back to just something you said offhand, which was that you have a task of chores to do, like chopping. We're going to come back to that in just a second. But before we leave this whole topic of connection and about how food can really bring families together, I was talking with someone else in another episode about how, they had all these food sensitivities and food allergies. And for a lot of families, that just kind of rips the family apart. Like parents are super stressed out, and they're short order cooking, and there's trouble with the grandparents, and nobody understands them and all of this stuff. But in her case, it was really a unifying tool. It was a connection tool. They explored it together. They dug into, how they were all feeling. And it was this catalyst for connection. And I heard you talk about it that way too, is that when you're cooking together, it's a great time for connection, which is, it's so interesting because how life works, right? Like my first teaching degree was in experiential education, where we, learned about how there's nothing more impactful in terms of learning than going through an experience. And there's nothing more connecting and bonding than going through a shared experience. And what you're describing is that you can do that in the kitchen every day with your kids.
For sure. I mean, the feeling of working toward a goal together, right? That's a real goal. You have to get dinner on the table by 6 p.m. and then you accomplish the goal together. For sure. Yeah. It bonds you. And
I remember when COVID first hit and you did a kids cooking camp. Can you tell us about that? That was a really cool event.
Remember when COVID first hit and parents were saying things like, if this school closing thing goes beyond 2 weeks, I am not going to make it, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
a long time ago.
Katie to the rescue.
And then it went to 3 weeks, it went to 2 months. And then when we all realized collectively that summer camps were getting canceled and that kids were going to continue being home in the summer with no semblance of school or structure or routine, my team and I said, we got to figure something out. We got to do something to like serve these families, and we got to do it big. So yeah, we had a free summer camp. We had 10,500 families participate. And I still get people emailing and saying, we started with summer camp and here's how that experience was for us. It was so amazing. Some of my favorite stories were in Panama. They were so locked down, Jess, that the children were only allowed to go 1 mile or less from their house with an adult. That was it. I mean, they were like family togetherness. That was all they could do. So the people in Panama, they were like, this is amazing. This is something that we're doing every day. And we're able to, cook meals together. We had one live session where people were saying, oh, I'm having the stir fry and the egg fried rice from the lesson today. And someone else said, oh, we had it earlier because we're all in different time zones. And, oh, we're making it right now. It smells really good. And it was this incredible feeling of internationality. Like I had meal planned the world. Yeah. And then we were all eating the same thing on the same day. It was incredible. And I think my other favorite story too was in a military family had just been relocated to Hawaii. And at that time, you had to stay in, may still be, you had to stay in your hotel room, locked in. You couldn't go to the pool. You couldn't go out to eat for 14 days when you first arrived in Hawaii as a quarantine. And so it just happened to coincide with our 8-day summer camp. And so this family was able to have something productive to do. They could order their groceries and work together. And it was so uplifting to be able to serve people in that way in this really sort of frightening, unsettling time, but also to know that it wasn't just something to do, right? It was these skills to build. And as I said, like this summer, 1 year later, people were still emailing and saying, we're still seeing benefits. Our daughter will still come into the kitchen and cut up vegetables for us. And we're still talking about, these recipes that we made. It's skills for life that you're going to use day in and day out. And I can think of no more important thing to teach kids.
I can't either. I mean, it's meaningful work, right? It's a meaningful contribution. And, learning the skill is almost secondary to like contributing to the family like that. It's so important for kids to have a felt sense of meaning. And I just want to just emphasize, because I think a lot of parents, myself included, I'm going to include myself here and say, it's a little bit scary to think about bringing your kids into the kitchen, right? And for me, it's like, I'm not that worried that they're going to cut themselves or hurt themselves or whatever. It's more just like, it takes extra time and extra energy, and something that I could do in 5 minutes, it's going to take them 15. And we got to get dinner on the table because we got to go to hockey practice or what have you, right? So it's something, getting kids in the kitchen is often something that it will be put off, right? Because you could do it, but I'm just going to do it myself. Right? Do you hear that a lot from parents?
Oh, more than you could even guess. I was just about to say, congratulations, Jess, you are a normal parent. Yes, I mean, giving up that sense of control over your kitchen and slowing down are like the two banes of parents' existence. So my hot ninja tip for that is don't teach kids to cook right before dinner. That's the worst possible time. Right?
So
you don't want to do something new because then now you're stressed. Now they're stressed. They've had a negative experience in the kitchen. Are they going to want to come back? No.
Oh my gosh, Katie, that is gold. Can you just say that again? Just say it again.
Don't teach kids to cook right before dinner. It breaks down. It's not good.
Because there's a whole lot of skills to learn. There's a whole lot of things. You can't just say chop the onion. Like they have to learn a whole bunch of things. That's a big deal.
Right.
I really appreciate that about your class, because you break it down into functional skills that they can then put together.
Right. We take a skills, not recipes approach. And that's another way to sort of calm a parent's brain too. I remember I was practicing a TED talk on teaching kids to cook in front of my neighbors. I needed bodies to practice in front of. And at the end, my neighbor said, she said, I've always thought that it seems important, but it's this big, scary idea, right? To teach my kids to cook or to make even a whole recipe. It just sounded so huge and intimidating. But you just told me I can teach my kids to measure a teaspoon of salt. She's like, I can do that, that feels possible, right? And that's what we have to do for our poor, exhausted parent brains is like, no, don't teach your kids to cook. That's gargantuan. Teach your kids to measure a teaspoon of salt. Teach them to cut a cucumber, right? Because when you look at a recipe, it generally breaks down into 5 to 14 skills. That is a lot. And so it's so much better to just teach those skills. So that's why I tell parents to be intentional about it. Yes, the kids, if they're motivated, the kids are going to ask to help at dinner time. Always when you have something to do in 17 minutes, right? And you have to get dinner on the table. That's just Murphy's Law of parenting. And so rather than say no, or rather than say yes, and then try to slow down and then everything breaks down, say yes when. Yes, you may help tomorrow after school. We're going to make a snack together, right? Or pick a date in the future when you're not stressed, when you're not time crunched, and then pick a skill to teach, depending on the child's age. If the kid really, really, really wants to help and they have some skills, well, now you can say, great, here's the basil, here's the oregano, here's the thyme, here's a little bowl. We're going to put you at the table, not in mom's elbow room, so you don't have to slow down. And even a 5-year-old, once you've taught that 5-year-old how to measure the flat teaspoon of salt, now they can take 5 minutes to measure the thyme, the oregano, and the basil, because you're still chopping all your food. You're still talking with them, but they're not in your elbow room. And just these kind of really practical situational things is, I think, what gives parents permission to say yes, to do this and let go of some control.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, that feels so much more fun.
Yeah.
Like I can imagine now my 9-year-old coming in saying, can I help? And I would say, oh my gosh, you totally can, because yesterday you learned how to measure a teaspoon of something, of oregano. And now I actually need that skill and I would love your help. That's super fun.
Yeah. It's motivating too, because then you can say, I need someone with the skill of peeling. And the kid goes, I have the skill of peeling. That's my skill, right? They have ownership and they're excited. They're a little excited to do it because you can like quantify these skills.
Hey parents, this episode of the Feeding Families podcast is being brought to you by the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. Whether you're looking to learn a little more about nutrition, health, and wellness, or pick up a few new recipes and cooking tips, or start a career as a holistic nutrition practitioner, there's something for everyone at CSNN. The Natural Nutrition Diploma Program is the flagship program that earns you a professional designation and title. If you just want to dip your toe in, there's the Healthy Eating and Lifestyle Certificate, the Holistic Culinary Certificate, or the Introduction to Natural Nutrition Certificate. For healthcare practitioners, CSNN offers advanced holistic nutrition workshops and certificate packages. With part-time and full-time schedules and flexible learning formats, including live online classes, there's truly something for everyone looking to improve the overall health and well-being of their family with holistic nutrition. Learn more at csnn.ca/holistic-family or follow the links in the show notes.
So don't tell anyone, but I play an organized person on the internet. I'm not actually that organized. We have a single piece of paper with weekly chores on it that's in like a page protector, and we use dry erase markers. So every Saturday when we get up, the kids know they have to do a minimum of 6 and they choose theirs. My daughter's starting to get smart. She's starting to do her chores Friday night. So she gets the good ones. The ones that she doesn't hate. And then the teenager who sleeps in is like, are you serious? That's what's left at noon on a Saturday? Okay. So he's like cleaning the toilets and stuff. But then, if we have, a bunch of peppers, a half bushel peppers from the farmer's market, I will write in, chop a gallon bag of peppers for the freezer, stuff like that. Or when we're traveling, we often pre-prep some meals for traveling. So I'll just make a list on a scrap piece of paper or the back of an envelope. See my organization. It's beautiful. Pinterest worthy. No, I'm kidding. And then the kids just put their initial by it and have to all pitch in.
It's so great. We do chores in our family, and I think chores are really important. And I'll tell you all this. When my husband and I looked at each other and we're like, we can't do all of this anymore. We need the kids to do chores. Mm-hmm. The same thing happened when we decided our kids needed to make their own school lunch. Mm-hmm. We were just like, oh gosh, this is scary. But you know what? Like, it didn't take that long. What it took was us committing to, like, we're going to do chores. We're going to have this lunch thing, teaching them how to do it, because we can't expect our kids to do something that they don't know how to do, right? And we can't tell them they did a crappy job of sweeping if we never taught them how to sweep. It took a little bit of that and just sticking to the rules of just like, this is what we do. And now like it's not even mentioned. It's just like the kids do their chores. But I have never thought of putting food prep into the chore list. That's a stroke of
Ooh.
genius.
Well, no, it's a stroke of desperation disguised as genius, but thank you. So you and I, Jess, we are now going to stand on our soapbox and tell all parents that they need to get their kids doing chores and packing their own lunches. Because it's rare. Okay, seriously, just yesterday, my 16-year-old Paul said, actually just today at school, at lunch, they were talking about who makes the lunches. And he was the only kid as a junior in high school, 11th grade, who makes their own lunch consistently every day. Most of them, their parents made their lunches. And then there were like 2 others who sometimes pitched in. And I thought, wow, yeah. So that's not exactly like a research study, but I'm pretty sure it's the minority of kids who know how to make their own lunches. But gosh, how many lessons my kids learn from making their own lunches, right? Think about the planning ahead, the feeling in the morning when you didn't make it the night before and you have to rush. And you learn from failure that it's so much smarter to make it the night before. And it's even smarter yet to make it right after dinner because there's food out in the kitchen and you can chatting with family. It's more social. And just, how to plan for how much you're going to eat. So many little life lessons. I feel like when I launch my kids into the world, they will be struggling less because how many of us when we were young adults, we had to like figure out how to feed ourselves, how to, manage, organize our lives instead of focusing on like building the career we wanted and being in college and finding the love of our life and all those things. So I want my kids to do like kind of the boring stuff, the basic life skills, the hard learning about organization now, so that when they're young adults, they can like seek their future.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me if this was your experience, Katie. It was like the biggest part of it for us was just deciding that it had to happen because we were out of steam. Is that like you say, it's like organization because of desperation.
A little dose of reality. It's not like once we started the system, it's always perfect and we never have to remind our kids and we never get complaints. Like maybe yours is perfect. I don't know. But
yeah.
As soon as my kids can, they'll like forget to do their chores. And then on a Sunday, we have to say, yes, you may play when your chores are done.
Yeah.
But that's parenting, right? Like we kind of signed up for the long road of parenting. And I think we all knew it wouldn't be super easy, but it's so worth it.
It is. And I think it's also, it's my kids always bring up the idea of like, oh, well, so-and-so gets paid for doing chores. And can I get paid for sweeping the floor and things like that? I'd love to hear your take on that.
We don't pay for chores personally.
No, we don't either. Well, I shouldn't say we don't. We do pay for some things that are over and beyond. Like we'll pay to like mow the grass or something like that. But my answer is just like, this is part of what it means to be part of a community.
Yeah.
And our family as a community. Like we've just got to get this stuff done.
Yep, absolutely. We do after meal chores too. And so we've tried all sorts of different systems, but after meal chores include like washing the table, putting the food away, doing some dishes, right? Maybe sweeping under the table. That's the one, my poor 7-year-old, like he's just incapable of doing the other things. So he always has to sweep under the table. It's what he can reach. So we would rotate those on a daily or weekly basis. And nobody ever wants to get doing the dishes because that's the worst one. Washing the table is the easiest one, right? And it became like this economy of chores and not feeling well about each other. So just the last few days, you'd be like, oh, Mom, what are the after meal chores? Who's got what? And I just out of the blue said, I think let's just all work till it's done tonight. Let's just all work till it's done. And because, they've been trained and they know how to do the things, it actually felt better. It was a surprise to me. It felt so much better where it was just like, rather than everyone having their own and some people are jaded because they got the longer one or whatever, just let's just all work till it's done. And I was kind of pleased with how that went. Probably won't work every time because someone might always, slink off before everything's done. But in that day, that for 2 days in a row, we've done that. And it just, there, you could feel in the room the sense of let's work together and get this done, that being in community and sharing responsibilities. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's neat. I'm so excited for this conversation. It's something I think about on a regular basis, and I think it's important to think about, that life gets so busy and you're just on this treadmill from like birth to age 20 and probably beyond. But you're just in management mode, right? And so it's important like just to take a moment and consider like what's the culture that you want to create in your home? What are the expectations? What are the responsibilities? How will those responsibilities be shared? And plan it out. Like give it some conscious thought. I hope this episode is helping people do that. I wanted to come back to picky eating because you have a TED Talk about picky eaters. You have worked with a lot of picky eaters. I mean, again, thousands and thousands of kids have come through your world. A lot of them picky.
A lot.
Tell me what you think about the connection between all of the stuff we've been talking about, responsibility, chores, cooking, and the pickiness that a lot of parents struggle with.
Yeah, boy, I think there are so many root causes for picky eating, and we know some of them are physical, like sensory processing issues and oral motor control and stuff like that. But there are also a lot of standard picky eaters. And I really think for some families, it's coming down to control. And when you think about a kid's life, like think about all the things that happen to them and come at them, right? School happens to them. Breakfast happens to them. Their transportation happens to them. They don't have a lot of sense of control in their life. And so what can they control? Well, eating, sleeping, and pooping, which are the three hardest parts of parenting, because the fact is we literally can't make them do it, right? Your 3-year-old hits her brother, you can pick her up and take her to her room. Your 16-year-old is unsafe with the car, you can take his keys. You could do this. You cannot make a kid chew and swallow, which is why there are so many power and control struggles, I think, around food. So how do we give kids some sense of control back? How do we empower them to feel like food is not happening to them? Well, you give them cooking skills, first of all, right? You get them involved in the kitchen. They're making friends with food. The kitchen is not a place of pressure. The kitchen is not a place where they feel like they have to eat it and then they get nervous and then they get stressed and then that shuts down their appetite, because the kitchen is just where you're making the food. So for kids who are stressed out about eating, the kitchen's a beautiful place to be because they can still get all that exposure to the sights and smells and the sounds of the food. They can touch it with their hands. They can be involved, but there's no pressure to eat. So we find that being involved with food does help a lot of your standard issue picky eaters be able to approach food with curiosity and not fear. So I like to say the kitchen is a lab for curiosity. And we all should be more curious as parents and teaching our kids to be curious. What happens when I do this? How do I feel when I eat this? We were never taught that in my generation, that food impacts how you feel, food impacts how you think. No, but if we can teach kids all those connections, that food is fuel for your day, what kind of day do you want to have? What kind of fuel do you want to choose? It's so empowering for kids to be able to nourish themselves and nourish others.
I got to take a moment with that. Those of you who are listening, on our show notes page, we're going to link to Katie's TED Talks. And she talks about these in her TED Talk. So it's very much worth your time to watch them. This idea of the kitchen being a lab for curiosity. I mean, I work with a lot of families and they all have kids that are struggling. They're struggling with learning. They're struggling with behavior. They're struggling with their moods. And that is my guiding principle of just, we got to get curious. We got to start asking questions. And I love how you're framing this in terms of when your kids are old enough, which doesn't have to be that old, but when they're old enough, you can get curious with them. And I mean, with kids are super curious. That's like embedded in their nature, right? So if you can guide that curiosity in a constructive way, which you can do in the kitchen, I agree. The kitchen is a lab for curiosity. And there's so much pressure on kids around food and parents too, right? Like the pressures.
Oh yeah. So far, I've done 2 No More Picky Eating challenges. We've served 7,000 families, which means that's a lot of parents really worried about picky eating.
Yeah.
It's certainly a real epidemic and a real problem in the developed world. what we find is that people are very surprised when simple strategies begin to make an impact where they were feeling hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
The first two steps that we do in these challenges, the first one is just to make sure kids are coming to the table with an appetite. So it's look at those snacks. Are your snacks maybe sabotaging your supper? It happens in more families than you would think because either the snack is too big or too close. So we kind of dial in those snack boundaries. And then the second thing we do is we put vegetables out first. We lead with our ACE at dinner. And I say, you lead with your ACE and you don't say anything, right? You can even leave the room. Just last week, we did a challenge and we had kids taking their carrot sticks on their Hot Wheels cars and running them around the track. We had little girls climbing up on the peninsula. I get to see the most fun pictures in my job and like dipping their vegetables in different dips. And that particular mom was almost like, wait, what are you doing? Don't play with your food. And she remembered the training and she went, and she just observed. She
Got
was
curious.
curious, watched her kids be curious, and they were exploring. They were playing with their food, literally. And then they started eating it. And the mother nearly fell over in shock because these were very picky eaters. She was very frustrated and she could not believe it. Just those two, like those are like tiny, tiny, tiny baby steps. And they're making huge impacts. So sometimes we just have to remove that pressure, remove that fear from our kids and allow them to be curious.
Yeah, I mean, it brings me back to my experiential education roots of just like you can pull someone through an experience or you can facilitate an experience and lead from behind and guide the experience without pulling them through it. And it's a very different process. And it sounds like that's what you're describing. It's like you can go top down and be like, here's the food, we're putting it on the table. I made it, you eat it.
Yep.
No one's leaving the table until it's done. Or you can get curious and you can create an environment, you can offer things up and you can see what happens and just sort of shift up how you're facilitating the experience by doing what you just did. Like let them put the carrots on the Hot Wheels and see what happens, see where they go.
Yes. Just don't leave hummus in a room with couches. That was a sad lesson one of our challengers learned. I said, oh, maybe at the table, Mom. Maybe only hummus at the table.
It would be interesting to dig into sort of like what is really driving this phenomenon, because you're right that there are so many, there are biological issues underlying picky eating as well and sensory issues and things like that. But there's a large cohort of kids for whom I agree with you. I think it has a lot to do with relationship and fear and things like that. And are you going to do the challenge again? Can we link to that for picky eating people?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll get you a link for the wait list. We do it about twice a year.
Yeah, definitely worth, even if all you get out of it is just training in getting curious, which is a different way of parenting, right? It's a different, and to me, like it brings a sigh of relief because we often put a lot of pressure on ourselves to know what we're doing. When, gosh, you guys, like, if you're a first-time parent or even, with your first child or even your second child, like, is there anything else in the world that we put so much pressure on ourselves for like getting it right the first time we do it? I can't think of anything,
No.
So we're all kind of just finding our way through this. And this whole idea of getting curious and approaching your kids with curiosity, to me, is a big stress relief because it just takes the pressure off to be like, you don't need to know what's going on and you don't need to know how to resolve it. Otherwise, you would have done it already. But you do need to get curious and try to figure out what the driving forces are and shift the environment somehow to try something new because what you're doing now isn't working.
Right. Yeah. And similarly, I think your audience has clearly been questioning the norm, right? They're looking at chemicals and cleaning supplies and personal products, right? And kind of asking those questions and seeking out alternative methods. And I just really encourage people to question what the culture is telling us about our expectations for kids and food. Because when you look at food marketing and restaurant kids menus, like I think that's another reason for picky eating is that the culture makes it so darn easy, right? We have all this kid food and it's easy to buy it in the freezer section and it's easy to have separate menus at the restaurant, and the kids are happy because their food is always the same and it's always expected, right? And it's always highly palatable. And that's where we got to start asking some questions. Should we really be creating kids' meals and kids' food? Or should we just treat children as young humans who are still learning to eat, but will eventually eat a fully adult diet, right? That's where I want to kind of redefine the kids meal, redefine the way we talk about even picky eaters. I tell the parents, don't call your kids picky eaters. They are learning to eat, right? Growth mindset, so key.
Oh, hashtag kids meal revolution.
Whoop, whoop.
Right? So this is
Yes.
one of Katie's TED Talks is all about this, the kids meal revolution. And I couldn't agree more. We got to think about how we're setting them up and the language. I'm such a stickler on language, using the right language. And I think that's a really great tip to not call your kids a picky eater, or also siblings will also call each other picky. Oh, why are you so picky? Right? We got to call them out on that, to be like, they're just learning. Maybe today's the day that they love this, right? Keep the door open.
Yeah. I like the phrase, your taste buds aren't grown up yet. Maybe you'll like that later. We just, I love to give parents phrases you can whip out at dinner without having to think, because we're so tired by the end of the day. So it's good. It's good to just have those lines that we can pull out to make us sound like we're smart, intentional, good parents, even when we're really just exhausted, bone tired parents.
Exactly.
Doing our best.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great for the kids too. Like, kids need that repetition as well. And gosh, if we could get parents and teachers using the same language, then like, wow, we'd be really setting kids up for success.
Yes, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Katie. I think we can wrap it up there, and maybe let's leave folks with a little bit of inspiration, because gosh, we've talked about so many different things around teaching your kids to cook, having them participate as strong, capable members of our communities, of our families, eating together, and really using food as a tool to bring the family together, even when there's stress around food and, time constraints and budget constraints and picky eating issues and things like that. It can be so stressful to feed your family. But I think you've given us some really great ideas on how to use food constructively to pull the family unit around an event and a cause of food. And we can change culture one family at a time, right? So our little family cultures are cultures within the bigger culture. So can you leave us with some final words of inspiration in terms of like, what's a good way to start?
Well, we hit pretty good upon being curious. And so I think it's so good for our kids to see us learn and see that we're still struggling sometimes, right? So it's maybe saying like, hey, I think it's really important that our family does some things with food together, some cooking. If you're not eating a family dinner, first of all, that's step one. Get around the table, get in the same room, eating the same food. But then, when you invite your kids into the kitchen, let them see that maybe you're not perfect either, right? There a little bit of that humility, and just realizing that we write the first chapter in our kids' book of normal. And we are co-authors of many of the other chapters, right? We create what they feel is normal. And so if we make decisions about what can and can't be done or brought into our home, that's what they know until they go out into the world, right? Until they're in preschool or kindergarten. And so I think you mentioned, and we didn't quite come back to it, you mentioned taking a step back, maybe going for a walk with your spouse or in-law, whoever might be co-parenting your kids with you, and talking about what are our values? What do we want our kids to say? Like, I always think when my kids are adults and a mutual friend like sees me and says, hey, I saw Leah in the store the other day, and Leah's like grown up. And Leah was just always so what? What do I want them to say about my kids as kids growing up? And what are our values? What do we say? Like, we always bike to school. And so we say, like, we're the biking family. We get outside, we move our bodies, right? And you can kind of create this culture with these phrases and, our family does this, our family does that. It sinks in and kids know it, they believe it, and then they live it. And that's what we want to do, to raise these kids and send them off into the world.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for all of your words of wisdom, Katie. You've left us with some really great sound bites. And, I feel like we could make some stickers and put them on our fridge. Katie says.
I love it.
So thank you so much. And everybody who's listening, please check out Katie's TED Talks, her Kids Cook Real Food e-class for teaching your kids to cook, and the Picky Eating Challenge. And we'll link to all of those. Thank you so much, Katie Kimball.
It's my delight. Thank you.
Bye for now.
So, if you listen to podcasts or watch YouTube, you've probably heard it 1,000 times before. The plea to subscribe and leave a review or a comment. Well, here we are again. But seriously, the review is especially important to us, as it has a huge impact on our discoverability amongst the zillions of podcasts all competing for your attention. So please consider leaving a review. And heck, we'd really love to hear your feedback. This pilot episode of the EcoParent Podcast Network was made possible with the generous support of Ontario Creates. Thanks for listening.